boys, Jay here. Welcome to Miles Memories Weekly, episode 267. Miles Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where we're talking about painting, modeling, and wargaming experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. Could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, Games Workshop showed off a brand new refresh of probably the smallest miniatures in all of Warhammer 40,000, and I am here for it. And you know what else I'm here for? All of the amazing hobby products available from EonsOfBattle.com. On EonsOfBattle.com, we are all restocked on our excellent hobby goodies, Great Tide Studio Bits to spice up your Space Marines, Army Painter paints, brushes, base and cork, ultra thick and ultra thin super glue, and we have terrain. It's the best way to support us doing what we do by getting a membership. Each month, members get a credit good for any one terrain pack we've ever made or the brand new one. In April, we have created the Armored Accessories Bits Pack. This set is full of awesome components to make your vehicles as unique and characterful as your infantry. With all kinds of equipment, storage, barrels, and tools for your tanks to carry, seals and tassels that are vehicle sized, big ol' missiles, and extra armor. So many pieces of armor plating in different sizes and styles so your tank can get the armor treatment that looks best for them. Whether it's a futuristic war machine, an ancient Hulk, or a chaotic monstrosity, these accessories will have your tanks covered. This Bits Pack is by tank players for tank players and is available both digitally and physically printed for you at EonsOfBattle.com. One of the classic orc kits is the Humble Orc Gretchen. I actually have 2 new in-box, new in-shrink Gretchen units. I just never really got around to putting them together. I haven't been playing my orcs a ton, although I did take them out somewhat recently just to give them a try, and I've played against orcs a couple of times. But I've never quite gotten into the groove of the orcs in 11th edition, or in 10th edition, and it looks like they're gonna be spicy in the 11th edition. But the new Gretchen. Every day this week, Games Workshop has been showing off Gretchen, and there was something classic and magical about the old guys. And actually, there were some even older guys that were metal that were maybe a little bit better than the plastics. It was in that weird time. Like if anybody remembers the old metal Space Marine Scouts and how awesome they were, and then when the plastic Scouts came out, they were much worse. Although now we have new plastic Scouts and they are phenomenal. I've already bought 2 boxes and I've been putting them together to add a little bit of accent to my Black Templar army, and I've really enjoyed them. And I think the new Gretchen, they're the same as the old Gretchen, but they're such a remarkable upgrade. They look so good with their bony little arms and their big old heads and their big old guns. Honestly, the new Gretchen look kind of cool, and I think they'd be really, really fun to paint. But what's gonna be a bummer is they look cool and their weapons look like dangerous and scary, but they're still little Gretchen in the game. They do a whole lot of nothing. The little guy aiming his gun with the funny hat on, the top knot guy with his little AK-47, and then we got Knifey Up guy. Knifey Up was one of the classic Gretchen from the old plastic range. But man, these guys are really, really cool. Tons and tons of these is gonna look amazing. And I think Zagrod Wart Snaga is going to be he's already kind of an auto-include unit for orcs, but he's gonna be an even more auto-include because the unit that he leads now looks so cool. Gretchen are definitely an interesting thing. They're probably the cheapest unit in the game, 10 Gretchen bodies for 40 points. 40 points is like the floor. Games Workshop doesn't make anything cheaper than 40 points. I think Kroot Hounds are also 40 points, but they're 40 points for 5, not for 10 like the Gretchen are. And maybe Nurglings are also similarly cheap, although they have uppy downy, so maybe they might be like 65 points. But Gretchen are incredibly cheap for what they do. Also, if they're standing on objectives, then you get to roll to see if you can generate a command point on a 4-up, which is really solid. I know Tau Ethereals have an ability to do that. I think the Death Guard Tallyman also can do that on a 4-up. It's really, really solid. And I believe if you have multiple Gretchen units standing on multiple objectives, you can try for each of them. Although you can only generate 1 extra command point per turn from any source, which is one of the rules of the game, which becomes really confusing whenever a rule breaks that rule, which I think happened with Imperial Knights and Leagues of Votann, where you can generate more than 1 extra command point from any source per turn. But like the rules very specifically say you may only generate 1 extra command point, which makes you think that's true. But then there are rules that supersede that rule that do let you do it. That's one thing that I am hoping for in 11th edition is a refresh of the rules where they've worked all of the frequently asked questions and designers notes and things into the core rules so that they're just correct the first time. Like, big guns never tire. I feel like almost every game of 40k I play, at some point me and my opponent are going to have to pause to go look up the big guns never tire rule to see exactly how they work, because it's another one of those things of the rules specifically say if you are in combat with the enemy, you don't get to shoot, and unless you have pistol keyword. But then big guns never tire is like, no, yeah, you totally just get to shoot. But what specifically does that mean? Are you only allowed to shoot at the units that you're in close combat with? Can other units shoot at the enemy that's in close combat with you? Like, it is kind of weird and wacky. And so I do hope that they just ditch the big guns never tire rule and just add rules to the vehicle keyword to make it really, really simple what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And there's so much of that in 40k. I've really been enjoying 10th edition, but I think it's the most like a real game 40k has ever been. But I do wish that it was better. Like, if everything was just written out better so that the game worked easily. Because currently there's a nice tight rule set and then like a 50-page document fixing that really tight rule set. Anyway, Gretchen. These guys are fantastic. Zagrod Wart Snaga is such an interesting character for the Orcs. He is the Gretchen character. He's 80 points, which is pretty darn cheap. What he does when he's attached to a Gretchen unit is he gives them, is it once per game or is it all game? He grants 3 benefits to Gretchen. He gives them +1 to attack and to hit and wound, which is kind of wild until you remember that it's on Gretchen. So they go from like, I guess they go from hitting on 4s to 3s with their guns, although their guns are strength 2 or 3, AP zip damage 1. And then similarly, their fists are also remarkably bad. So you're kind of going from doing on average no damage to on average like 1 or 2 damage. You can get lucky because you're rolling so many dice that sometimes you'll just get lucky and do a little extra spike of damage. But in general, his other abilities, he gives them, instead of just 6-inch move, he gives them 12 inches of movement, which is kind of wild because that can also stack with advancing and charging, which you can do during the Wog turn. So Zagrod and a blob of 20 Gretchen is like one of the fastest units in the game. And he grants them -1 to be wounded, which again sounds incredible until you remember it's Gretchen. And so most enemy units are wounding them on 2s, and then they're going to wound them on 3s. It will save the lives of many Gretchen, especially with the 5-up invulnerable save during the Wa turn, but it's not the biggest deal. It takes a unit that is remarkably bad and just turns them into bad, but in the context of 20 guys attached to Zod, they all of a sudden do become quite good, even though they're bad. And I kind of do love things in the game that are bad, but you can get a lot of utility out of them. It's really, really fun. And it's always a little frustrating to play against armies where every data sheet is just kind of good. Like, every Space Marine unit in the game is pretty good, but that can be really, really hard to play against because if you're hoping that your army is good and their army is good, every unit that you lose is like a real hole in your force that is a little bit hard to recover from. Where if you have just a whole bunch of nothing units, you lose 3 of them a turn, you don't even notice. I've been playing my Kroot quite a bit, and I really, really love the Kroot. Having this much fun with a Kroot army is making me not want to play Orcs even more, just because I feel like Orc data sheets, they're really good and really bad. It reminds me a little bit of my Black Templar. Like, they hit like a truck. They've got good armor penetration. They got a good number of attacks with their melee weapons. They can be hitting on 3s. They can be hitting on 2s. They can be great at landing in close combat and dealing damage. But otherwise, like, their save characteristics are really bad. Their ranged characteristics are really bad. They kind of only have one opportunity to do what they need to do, and nothing else is really helping. Like, their guns aren't keeping the enemy at bay. If you have a whole bunch of shots that are going to hit on 5s and 6s, or more likely just 6s, I don't really care to hide from those attacks, so I'll just get a castle up and get into appropriate position to make your charge harder. Make sure that I'm a good Overwatch threat against your advancing Orcs. If I do get to shoot at you, your 10 blob of Orcs is going to very quickly become like 5, 6, or 7, And when you start to drop models, your actual lethality drops dramatically with it, which is kind of the problem with vehicles versus infantry. And it's one of my pet peeves with vehicles and with like monsters in general, because a demon prince on 1 wound remaining is exactly as scary as a demon prince on full wounds remaining, which is really annoying. But like a squad of orc boys, 10 orcs is scary. 2 orcs is not scary, but it's still the orc squad. I wish that there was a way to make it so that vehicles maybe they bracketed even harder, like they had a middle bracket and a low bracket, because just -1 to attacks isn't that big a deal. Especially since in the game, modifiers to your hits and your attack profiles can't stack. So like if you already were at -1 to hit my Kroot because they have stealth on everything, and you're -1 to hit because you're bracketed, they don't stack. So like bad data sheets are rough, but they become really fun if you're something like the Kroot army in the Kroot hunting pack detachment, because you can, if you're playing well and you've got all of the units near where they should be, and you're doing a good job with your order of operation, you can make them so good. Like in the Kroot hunting pack, there's only like 5 Kroot units, but they're all good and they all serve a purpose in order. So like step 1 in the shooting phase is usually I will shoot with a Kroot squad, just a regular squad of Kroot with an attached Warshaper, because the Warshaper can free strat. They shoot their piddly guns that aren't going to do anything, but they just need to hit and get through the whole process, because then I can spend 1 CP for free from the Warshaper to do a Trap Well Laid. A Trap Well Laid gives me +1 AP with all Kroot things against that target. Then I shoot with the Lone Spear, and then and hopefully that damage removed 1 model from the enemy's unit, because now they're injured, and because of my detachment ability, all of a sudden I get +1 to hit against that unit. So all of a sudden I've stacked 2 benefits. Then I shoot with the Lone Spear, and if the Lone Spear manages to hit with anything and they can't have +1 to hit from the previous thing, then my whole army can have reroll hits against that unit. And all of a sudden, all of these things start to stack up. And if I've done everything properly, then all of a sudden, my guys that aren't particularly good get pretty good. And it's really fun for me to try to figure all this stuff out and make sure that it's all happening. And it's really fun to see my units that aren't very good all of a sudden punching well above their weight class. I have to make sure that my Kroot blobs are moving in such a way to give me room to advance in charge with some of my Krootox Riders and Krootox Rampagers. The Krootox Riders and Rampagers are really, really good, especially after I've managed to stack all these buffs. Like the 5-up invulnerable save from my detachment ability against ranged attacks, and the 6-up in close combat is a lifesaver, because literally every time I roll it, it saves the life of one of my 6-up save Kroots. Like, it's all of these things work together to make the army really fun to play. And I feel like orc rules aren't quite written like that yet. They're written more like Space Marines, where you've just got your data sheets, you've got your things, and then you just go forth and do battle. But you're not as good as like Space Marines who can just do that. You do need a little bit of help. And so I really hope with 11th edition, they kind of reconfigure the orc army to be a little bit more interesting, because currently the orcs are in a little bit of a rough spot. I also think the Wa needs to be looked at, because the Wa is really fun and really flavorful and really good, but not good enough. So the Wa gives you advance and charge, it gives you +1 attack and strength with your melee weapons, and it gives you a 5-up invulnerable save in general for all of your orcs from the start of your command phase that you call it to the start of the next command phase. Really, really good, but I think it promotes a style of play that doesn't necessarily benefit the orcs that much, and you really feel it when it's gone. I remember playing my orc army in a game not super long ago on Tabletop Simulator, and like the Wa turn was pretty good. But then as soon as the Wa is over, all of my units are back to being not as good as they were during the WoG. And it definitely felt like, did I do enough to cripple my opponent's army so that I don't need those benefits anymore? And I also think it kind of inspires a just full send game mode, where hopefully you've advanced and charged and fought with everything in your army. But all of a sudden, your whole army is just in your opponent's face, and hopefully they don't just fall back and then just decimate your army, because it really hurts, and it's not phenomenal. The Wa has always been something in 40k for the Orcs, and it's always been handled different ways, and it's been interesting, but it's just kind of, I don't know, maybe there needs to be more benefits stacked on top of the Wa so that you get a little bit of it even after the Wa turn is over. Maybe there needs to be something so that you don't necessarily have to just full send your whole army and just really hope that that works, because it very often doesn't. I do think that Orc shooting needs to be helped out a little bit. It shouldn't be made better than hitting on 5s and 6s, because Orcs are bad at shooting, but it should be made up for in number of attacks. So maybe that means that Orcs have better access to sustained hits, or maybe lethal hits, just to try to make some of their weapons a little bit more like you can count on them. Because if you're shooting with 5s and 6 dice, you basically just say, I don't care if this attack hits because I'm not relying on it, because you can't rely on it. But if you just can't rely on it, then basically they don't have guns. And if they don't have guns, they're worse. But if they're even worse, then they should be pointed cheaper, but then they can't be pointed any cheaper because they do have those really nice combat weapons. A squad of Orc boys is 80 points. And for 80 points, they're really, really good. Like, every other army in the game would take Orc boys because they're excellent for 10 for 80 points. But they're like, they can just die. Like, if they get on the wrong side of almost anything in the game, they'll get wiped. They're, on the one hand, they're so not survivable that they're kind of bad, but on the other hand, when they make it to close combat, they're quite good. And so how do you really balance that? And trucks are very useful for transport, but they're 70 points, which is also pretty cheap, but is it cheap enough to really make it viable? You're doubling the cost of the squad of Orcs that you're attached to. Like, all of a sudden, a 70-point truck, an 80-point unit, and then I think another 70-point war boss, all of a sudden that's getting pretty darn expensive for the package that it is, and how easily it can be destroyed by most anything in the enemy army. I don't know, Orcs are a weird one, they're a tricky one. I almost think a really good way to handle it would be to give Orcs orders, kind of like the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard can pick, I think, from 3 orders. They can move for better movement. They can shoot, or whatever for better shooting. And then they can affix bayonets for better close combat. Nobody ever affixes bayonets. It's really sad. But I think something like that, an order system, could be really cool for the Orcs, so that if you're making sure that everything is working and humming along nicely, your Orcs have certain benefits that they wouldn't normally have. I think that could be a really way to handle it, but I feel like Orcs as is, they definitely struggle a fair bit, and it's really sad. I played with a Morkanaut, and the Morkanaut just exploded, and I actually played against a Morkanaut and a Gorkanaut last weekend, and I in one turn, I took out the Morkanaut. I never managed to kill the Gorkanaut, although I never tried. Another problem with the Orcs is that their whole thing is just come at me. And so I just I moved onto like my expansion objective and then my home field objective, and then just kind of waited for the Orcs to come to me. And then it was fine because I could shoot every Orc unit with like 5 different units and kind of easily kill them. I don't know, Orcs, I don't think they're a terrible army in 10th edition, but I just don't think that they have the juice. They don't have like that extra little something that they need to be a really fun, interesting army in 40k. I definitely feel that whenever I play a more squishy army, like when I'm doing a really bad job with my Dark Eldar and things just die before they've gotten to do anything, it definitely feels bad, where I've really been enjoying my Kroot, because even though the Kroot are even worse than the Dark Eldar, they feel really fun to play. And if I'm doing things properly, I can really, really make it hard for my opponent to even kill a 10 squad of Kroot carnivores with a 6-up save. Like, it gets really nice. I wish that I wish playing the Orcs felt as good as playing as the Kroot. It's a different beast to something like a Space Marine or like a Necron, but it's a flavor that I really do enjoy. I really hope that in the upcoming 11th edition, the Orcs get a good look in. I really hope that they kind of rewrite the Orcs The Orcs have one of the biggest ranges in Warhammer 40,000 with the Beast Snagas and all of those new buggies that came out. But currently, they're not up to snuff. They need quite a bit of help. And I think being in the launch box for an edition change is gonna be that help that they need. Let me know in the comments below if you guys are as excited for the Orcs as I am in 11th edition. And what do you think of the Gretchen? I really like them. I think that they're a 10 out of 10. I want them immediately. I don't know what I'm gonna do with those 2 old boxes that I have. I guess sell them or something, or maybe I'll have to give them away because no one will want them. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.